Women's words are not the stuff of history, so says Clara Sue Kidwell in her essay, Indian Women as Cultural Mediators, in which she compares fact and fiction of lauded Indian women such as Pocahontas and Sacagawea, and bemoans the lack of written testimony. They did not write their own accounts to analyze their own actions, so she might be right. The words of Native women are lost from history, but their actions are largely present. The actions of Native women guided the European men whose words can be found today. Native women, often through marriage and childbearing, wove permanent ties between Native and European cultures, and in many cases, the actions of Native women led their own people through the most tumultuous moments in their history. To understand how Native American women interacted with European men, it is important to first understand their role within their own societies. Though this varied from nation to nation as each had, and continue to have, their own unique culture, women in Native societies were largely involved in the daily workings of their communities. They were the agriculturists. They planted, harvested, and distributed food. Among Algonquian-speaking societies in particular, women grew and harvested crops, as well as produced bedding, baskets, fashioned animal skin into clothing, and made other domestic tools critical to life in their community. With their duties balanced through child-rearing and mourning the dead, it is easy to see that women were strongly united with the earth in spirit, their roles anchored in life-giving. In her essay on the Anglo-Algonquian gender frontier, Kathleen M. Brown writes, "Lineage wealth and political power passed through the female line, perhaps because of women's crucial role in producing and maintaining property. Native women and men operated in ways that complemented each other, rather than existing in total equality, a misconception that historian Dawn Marsh says leads many to describe Native societies as egalitarian. But equality did exist within Native societies. Men and women worked equally as hard and were equally as valued, only for different reasons. Men were responsible for hunting, defending their community and engaging others in warfare. They produced weapons and held political roles at greater rates than Native women, although women often held political positions tied to decisions for the welfare of the community and were highly respected for their wisdom. Many societies practiced matrilineal descent, where clan membership and possessions descended through women instead of men. Among Plains Indians, women often decided where to camp on bison hunts, could trade their surplus crops, had the right to divorce, and because they owned the contents of their lodge, could remain in their dwelling while the dismissed husband had to look elsewhere for a place to sleep. Because men's duties drew them away from their community, sometimes hundreds of miles away for long periods of time, they were often its public face. They interacted with other Native communities and with traveling Europeans. When they returned, they were often off-duty. While they would assist women with harvest and home construction, Europeans passing through often found them smoking, gambling, or making minor repairs during the time between hunts, which grew increasingly demanding with the rise of the fur trade. For this reason, many Europeans concluded that men held all the power and did none of the work. In 1644, a Dutch reverend wrote that Native women were obliged to prepare the land, to mow, to plant, and do everything. The men do nothing except hunting, fishing, and going to war against their enemies. John Smith said, "The land is not populous, for the men be few. Their far greater number is of women and children." The belief that Native women were slaves to their lazy menfolk bridled many Europeans, as European women lived within strictly regulated social norms that protected their honor and civility. Misconceptions about the complementary roles of Native men and women and the Native ways of life all came to bear in Indigenous European relations, especially those that occurred exclusively or specifically between Europeans and Native women. First impressions of Native women recorded by Europeans are almost entirely based on surface-level glances, coming from places of deep misunderstanding. Europeans saw Indian women as promiscuous drudges who labored tirelessly to please their idle men. All of both sexes go about naked. They, women, have another custom, very shameful and beyond all human belief. For their women, being very lustful, caused the private parts of their husbands to swell up to such a huge size that they appear deformed. They, men, marry as many wives as they please, and son cohabits with mother, male cousin with female, and any man with the first woman he meets. They dissolve their marriages as often as they please. The women, as I have said, go about naked and are very libidinous, yet they have tolerably beautiful bodies and cleanly. When they had the opportunity of copulating with Christians, urged by excessive lust, they defiled and prostituted themselves. Immediately, we can see the portrayal of native women as uncontrollably lustful, solely responsible for the desires of the men who viewed them as objects. The emphasis on the woman's sin in fornicating with Christians and the lack of emphasis on the part of Christians is a theme that would play out over the course of centuries. There are several native women standouts in history, though why they have made the impression on American culture that they have is another topic. Denise K. Lijamodier, a native woman and author, proposes that in order for a native woman to stand out in history, she must have aided or had sexual relations with white men. The indigenous woman given to Hernando Cortés, known as La Malinche or Dona Marina, certainly fits these requirements and played a critical part in the conquest of the Aztec Empire.